but it's all to do with the power structure being shifted to the female, not for the female's use. We, because of our egos, tend to grab hold of things which claim to give us power, but in reality, it's for someone else's purpose. These series of talks are not meant to give you gloom and doom, but to see the brightness, you have to go through the darkness. Many people cannot wake up. They don't have the ability. The part that makes you a creative individual of any age, any gender, is the part which has been under most of the attack for the last 100 years or more. And it's been stated in Kessler's book and others that if they can destroy that part of the brain, the ghost in the machine, as they call it, that makes you truly, uniquely you, then they will have conquered the world and they can bring in their utopia. Their utopia, which many New Agers have all been taught to look forward to, is the elimination of conscious, individualistic thought. The manipulation of weather is going on at a daily basis now. A few years ago, in major newspapers, the American Air Force said it would shortly own the weather. Well, you see, it does already. It does. We're being sprayed every day and night like bugs. Most people cannot see it because they can only see or hear or know about that which is told to them by the media. And if the media doesn't mention it, you are talking a different language when you point it out to them. It cannot be important, or the media would tell them. The reasoning is done for them by the media, and they've come to accept that. And the race to destroy is just coming on. And at your work, or you're out amongst other people, you'll observe the same emotions in them too. It's being used on a daily basis, the psychotronic, technotronic weaponry, scalar technology, in unison with the spraying of the air, which makes it far more effective, creating a heavy atmospheric electrical circuitry. And we ourselves, in the physical world, are run through biochemical and bioelectrical impulses. So I leave you tonight with the introductions to these topics and just general coverings of each part of them. I hope to go into them in far more detail in the future for those who don't take offense at what I say. I personally have no prejudice about any of the things I talk about or the people I talk about. I just state what is. Those who are offended must look to themselves and ask why. If they tell you that, like again Orwell's 84, that there is no gravity and you can float away and you all parrot the same thing. If someone says, oh no you can't, he just states what is. Don't kill the messenger. Don't kill the one who says the king has no clothes. But the herd, unfortunately, the mob, as the Masons say, because of their very intense conditioning, which has taken very well, will turn on the messengers, as they always have in history. It's Halloween time. There are many plays on the words within Halloween. Hallow also comes from the sun, how. but it also is a play on hollow. In is the old English for eye, the eye of the sun, the S-U-N. It's also the hollow eye which you will see in the skull. Everything has many meanings. The elite are taught them, you are not. I'm trying to teach you them, and I hope to continue. So good night for now. Peace to you, and may your God, or your gods, or your favorite tree, or your best pet go with you. Hi, this is Alan Watt, and it is November the 3rd, 2006. This talk is to do with psycholinguistics. It's the art of the use of words, repetition of scientifically aligned words and phrases which alter your behavior. It's a well-understood science at the top. It's implemented in all media every day. The public are completely unaware of it, really, but they certainly are downloaded with the ideas that are produced, and they act it out, they bring it out into their behavior, they act it out into reality. So psycholinguistics is the term used. Very, very ancient science, well understood. And before I continue, I'd like to mention that this talk will be recorded and passed around, and for those who receive it on a disc or a tape or whatever, please check into the website cuttingthroughthematrix.com and check out all the other talks that are available there. Check out the books, CDs and DVDs for sale, and I'll be glad to hear from you because it keeps me going. It'll pay for the site and all the other costs involved. Thank you. So to continue with psycholinguistics, we find that when the Communist Party arose to power, they had access to much of this information because their job was to act like the two horns of the bull. One side was them, one side was the supposed existing capitalist system, the laissez-faire. In reality, the bankers were the capstone. And their job of the Communist Party was to alter society. It was the fastest method of creating a centralized form of government and law, regulations. And with the takeovers of other countries, mainly in Europe, so many small countries living side by side with different languages, variations on cultures, different government systems, it was the fastest way to amalgamate them into the one system in preparation for joining with the West at the right time. People don't realize that the two pillars, and the fire and the water, and that the two opposites are always used to create a third way, as they call it, the third way, the solution, the synthesis of the whole idea. Now, in the beginning was the Word. The Word didn't create anything. The Word esoterically created the big idea. The big idea was the abstract form, unformulated chaos, you see, but wisdom was behind it, so the serpent moved over the waters. This is the esoteric understanding, as it's always been pre-Christian, pre-Judaism, pre-most of the religions you know, in fact. And so you have the unformed idea, but wisdom is behind it. It's the big idea, as it's expressed in high Freemasonry, in the high esoteric circles. The word is to formulate it, to speak it into existence. You create a system, a world, a perception by speaking it into existence, and through repetition thereafter. Using the tribal systems, if you get the ones at the tops of the tribes, or the kings and the queens, that's why kings and queens were invented and given to the public as a showpiece. Whatever they say or do, the people down below emulate, whether it's what they say or the accent they use, as in England, which is actually a corrupt form of English, because the Germans brought it in with them, with George, and the modern day Queen, or Elizabethan Queen's English is actually a corruption of English, because he couldn't speak English very well. Now it's the norm at the top. So the people down below emulate what they see at the top. It doesn't mean that what you're in perception becomes reality for the public, but it's not the true reality. It's a show for the public. The word is spoken into existence. Now we see the communists, as I say, who wrote more about this technique because they've been heavily trained by the esoteric groups who'd already ruled the world for thousands and thousands of years. And they were taught some of these sciences at the top. And Lenin said, we shall win by slogans, the repetition of slogans. And the idea was to divide and conquer all the existing structures within society, within humanity, divide the generations from each other, divide, not only separate the generations, but actually make each one think and interact only with their own as they grow up and then mature throughout their life. They wouldn't mix with either group below or above. Interesting how detailed it was. And this works to the present day. We don't look towards anyone younger for wisdom. We don't look to anyone older for wisdom. We sort of just float through a particular little avenue we're given, and we're disassociated with everyone else around us. We also find the use of slogans, as I say, don't trust anyone over 30, then they kept dropping it and dropping it. And that was first put out by the Communist Party within the United States. It worked very well. We find the same slogans used to silence anyone with who is investigating the system as they see it at the time. And they're either called a Nazi or an anti-Semite or a Zionist. And slogans silence the person who's inquiring, you see. And it can be very innocent, the inquiry itself, but to silence you is to get a response, a guilt response in you, a conditioned, reflexed guilt response, so that you shut down and you don't even question yourself why you're shutting down. These are silencing techniques which are well understood, again, thousands of years ago. If you said anti-priest at one time in the Middle Ages, you may have been burned at the stake. So it doesn't matter what group you've identified with culturally or you've adopted, slogans can be used against you, and your own affiliation with the group you think you put yourself into will help to silence you. It's best to be a loner and to think for yourself. And don't let any name-calling put you off the track that you're on. Even if you find out it's only a false herring, it's a false lead, a red herring, still persist, because you have to go through all of the maze of disinformation front groups to get to the truth in anything. And then you find they're all controlled at the top anyway by the same bunch. It's interesting that so much of the Nazi philosophy, which was taken from social Darwinism and the Superman complex that they came up with, you create this race of supermen through science, and all of the Blavatsky Masonic type symbology adopted by the Nazi group and the Knights Templar affiliations with it, and the Germanic Knights, etc. All of this is held together at the top by the same esoteric group, one at the very top. And a lot of it was taken from Talmud and Kabbalah, the Jewish side of things. So there's your irony, you see, that so much of this esoteric, magical searching, you might say, this destiny thing, came from Kabbalah, and ended up turning against the people who thought they owned it. This is a tremendous part of the science as well, is that you become that which you hate. You become that which you hate. This is a truth that's always been eternal, always will be eternal. It is eternal. you become that which you hate. The parent that you don't identify with, the parent that you can describe so well as to why you hate them, you become. The hate will eat you up, and you'll find yourself responding to others as your mother or your father would in that situation. It's the same thing with those who began to hate the whole German people for World War II. We can see it in places like Israel in the way they look upon the Arabs. And you say, well, what's the difference now? What's the difference in the Nazi philosophy, where one thinks they're superior over the other? So you become that which you hate. And that's why hate, which is encouraged in the system by those at the top, they're very good at getting everyone to hate everyone else, to get the certain whites to hate the blacks, and certain blacks to hate the whites, and Chinese and India and so on, and it goes on and on and on. And through this division and conquering, they can always stir it up when need be, and then come in with their solutions and totalitarian rules, because the law system which runs everything must constantly be reinforced, propped up, and given more power in the structural pyramid system. To give an easy example of psycholinguistics, and the best way to get it through to the public is either through official repetition, through media news. Politicians do it all the time, as they come up with neologisms and repetitive phrases, weapons of mass destruction, and then all the other big guys at the top say the same thing until they speak a non-existence into a reality. This is how it's done. But back in the 50s and 60s, the envelope, then it suddenly changed, you see, after World War II, and stepping up into 50s with the music scene coming on, as they really gave a separate musical sphere for teenagers, we see something interesting happening. And this was discussed in books on the subject back at the beginning of the 20th century in communist writings, this very technique to be used on the young with the use of music to implement thoughts and agendas. So in the 50s and 60s, we changed from the regular kind of male entertainer in music and in acting, and then we got the skinny guy, with the drain pipe trousers, they call them. And we see with Buddy Holly and different ones that came out of nowhere were heavily backed, and I always find there's a story behind the one that's given. But for this particular period, the object of marrying or mating up to marry was altered carefully, quietly, to redefine the position of the man. And it was done with the introduction of certain words which alters the perception of the totality of the person. We find that in the songs, you don't find the man singing about the girl or the girl singing about the man. Suddenly everything became baby. They called everybody baby. Now, in psycholinguistics, regardless of what you think it means superficially, because people don't think beyond the superficial that hits them, it wasn't just meaning that you're cute. A baby is still a baby. A baby is a young, immature human being. And a baby is a helpless thing. A baby has no maturity and no real decision-making, as we would say, in a social structure. It can't do it. It's too young, too immature. Now think of the words in the upcoming song and analyze it, because if the woman was truly serious, which is not, of course, this is all part of the agenda, if she was truly serious about what she's saying, she's not looking for the mature existing, the quiet, mature, well-informed male. She's looking for a child, in a sense, but not a child just to take care of, as a child that she would end up being married with. Well, how long can you carry on calling the person you're living with and growing with and getting older with a baby, you know? And not just a baby, but a little baby. Psycholinguistics at work. We end up humming the songs, singing the songs, toddlers sing them. It alters perception. It alters the reality. And it becomes the new reality. When this was going on, dozens and dozens of brand new magazines just appeared on the shelves, heavily backed professional companies behind them. Now it's been admitted that some of these were CIA backed and probably owned, in fact. But at the time, in the 50s, 60s and 70s, increasing on upwards, 90-odd% of all magazines were aimed at women. Because, as I say, in psychology, which is well understood, women can be changed easier than the male in a cultural sense. They're more apt to try something new. And there was a plethora, a mass avalanche of experts on every topic imaginable, and at the time even unimaginable, telling people how to behave, what their sexual life should be like what their relationship should be, what a man should be, what a woman should be. And never-ending babble by experts. Now tie that back to the impact of science on society by Lord Bertrand Russell, a big key player, along with Huxley and the Tavistock Institute for World Agendas and World Culture Alterations. When he said much of this stuff, he talked about the alteration of culture through the use of experts, training society that nothing is of any value unless it's said by an expert. It was all to stop us thinking for ourselves. And he said that one day a woman wouldn't be able to change the diaper on a child without expert advice, and that's happened. That's actually happened. And now, of course, people don't even know how to cook anymore. It's male or female. It's terrible, but that's the reality we live in. Expert advice on everything. And this was to alter culture and to make everyone dissatisfied with their own particular situation in society. So the man stopped being the hero type figure, the leader, the one who was quiet and calm, made decisions. That's the stereotype perfection, which probably never existed either, at least not on the whole, because most men were under the same system, working for the system, and therefore subservient to the system. But that was a stereotype they had to look up to, was the one who was quiet and calm and collected and didn't blurt out his emotions. And all these magazines in the 50s onwards, 60s, 70s, 80s to the present time started talking about the man who was sensitive and yet strong, who could cry and yet laugh. And all these opposites mixed into the one heavily pushed this kind of stuff. And if old Joe there was the quiet guy who came home and spoke when spoken to and was reserved, well, suddenly he was abnormal according to the magazines, and this created that dissatisfaction in his mate, you see, because she was after a fictional perfection that was getting broadcast through television and talk shows and magazines. What she was looking, and when you ask them really what many women, even today, why they married a certain person, often the answer is, well, he made me laugh. He made me laugh. What a reason to get married. He made me laugh. You see? So they want a sensitive but strong, a firm but yielding, who will cry occasionally, and who can make them laugh, male. They're looking for a sort of manic depressive circus clown, and this is why they can't find all of that in one person, because they'd have to be terribly unstable, or maybe on Prozac or something. But this is the nonsense that's been fed. People are being indoctrinated and have been indoctrinated to make them terribly unhappy, because society must alter all of the old ways to bring in the new world order for the new era, where there is no marriage. The government wants direct contact with the individual. They don't want a family in the way or family members in the way. They don't want the remnants of any clan system that might exchange ideas amongst themselves and say, well, hey, this isn't right. No, they want you, like Orwell's 84, to be quivering, waiting for them, the government, who is always watching you, the individual, to send their contacts directly to you, and you'll have no one to share your thoughts with. You'll be isolated, socially isolated. That's the technique that's been used. Now, what did men get during this time? Well, they came, as I say, from the old style, the hero type, the quiet one, which was fictional, at least in the perfection that they showed. And because everyone who is subservient in a system cannot be, he can't guide his own life. He's still got to go along with the rules laid out that he was born into, the system that he is born into. But it began to change into this silly, immature type character. And I must admit, I didn't watch comedies much. They replay a lot of the old ones today on television. And it's really phenomenal to watch this debasement of the male, who's always a silly little man, no matter, a little boy really, no matter how old he is, who's obsessed with sports, who's always lying like a child and getting up to no good, and he's treated like a child by the family, the children and the wife. This is the new role model. It's quite amazing to see how this has actually worked in society, until men are floundering. They don't know what they are. They have no guideposts, and with the single-parent families, which again were heavily, massively pushed, because no one can really be, no person who doesn't understand this can be happy with a partner. The system is geared to make you unhappy with everything, with everything that you buy. Is not enough. It makes you happy for 5 minutes, then you have to buy something else. If capitalism, as it's pushed, worked, we'd all have all that we needed. The last thing that you bought would have been made you happy forever, but it doesn't. It's a big lie. They sell you mythologies and fantasy. But the partner you're with would also be the one that you would be bonding to. But here you have how many thousands of magazines and talk shows telling you that you can't be happy because this and this and this makes it so. It's a war, an ongoing war, where neither male nor female benefits. It's not meant to benefit the people at the bottom. There's always an ongoing war, like the war room that they have in the Skull and Bones temple. It's actually called the war room, and it isn't just war of the elite families to take over the natural resources of the world. That is one part of it. They've been doing that for centuries. It's also a war, a constant war on the public, man, woman of all ages, all age groups. It's a constant, ongoing war. And that is why people cannot possibly be content within the structure, bad as it is. They can find no peace within themselves. And if you find no peace within yourselves and your anchors are all broken and you're floundering in the seas, you get tossed all over the place with all the things that are told that they pretend will make you happy. There's nothing on television that is real. Nothing. Look at Dr. Phil, the magician who comes on like a superstar, and everybody howls and screams as he comes on the stage, and he sort of walks in that stiff way of his. And he solves everybody's problems in an hour. On TV, that is. It's not real. It's not real. And look at all the backup staff to do all the investigations, preliminary stuff, and yada, 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 to make you think that the man is going to sort it out. And what is sorting it all about? Well, he's trying to make a couple fit in to a pre-existing system where we expect through movies, etc., to have a happy ending. So when the couple are breaking up, no matter what's happening, the idea is to keep them together and keep the misery going on forever and ever. And believe you me, that is the worst thing you could possibly do. But that's what psychiatry's function is. Psychiatry and psychiatrists are trained that when the patient comes in suffering from whatever he's suffering from, you medicate them and all the rest of it. They don't do so much psychotherapy as they used to. They rely mainly on various drugs and so on, because the stress of modern living, again, the floundering on the high seas with no anchors, you're cut off from your old culture, your purpose, your direction. And so their job, the psychiatrist's job, is to tranquilize you initially, to take the fears away through chemicals. And then once you're out in society, you'll tick off all the things that you're now doing. Are you having sex again? Are you interested? And are you back at work? Are you purchasing things? And you listen to this kind of stuff. What your goals are. Well, I want to buy a new car. I want to get another house. I want to. So all the things that destroyed you in the system and made you ill, if you're back doing the same things again, he'll put you down not as cured, but at least the closest thing to cured. You're doing all the right things, which are the system's way of taking you off as normal. We're not living in a normal society. The purpose of life for the individual has to be sought out. It actually has to be mined. It's almost like being a deep-sea diver. You have to go down into the depths to find yourself. And in the most ancient times to the present, and it's been above many temples in old times, was know thyself. That's the first prerequisition to higher learning. Know thyself. And people say, well, I know myself. They don't know themselves at all. They are composites of their indoctrinations. They are composites of the culture they're born into and the system they're born into. It's like many fragments put together. They don't know what motivates themselves. They're totally unaware of external motivations acting upon them. And in psycholinguistics, the terminology itself is a prime factor. When we think of the thousands and thousands of sounds in nature, and the thousands and thousands of words going into millions of words if we take other languages into account, sound is just a form of communication to put abstract thoughts into forms which we can exchange and communicate with each other and understand what the person means. And yet, when we find ourselves responding emotionally to a word or words or a string of words, we've already been conditioned. We're having an emotional response to what really is just a sound. All it took to have someone killed at the stake and burned in the Middle Ages was the cry, the accusation. The cry itself was the accusation of witch or devil worshipper or Satanist. That's all it took. We found the same thing with heretic, the word heretic. It closed down all of your defenses. You couldn't say it, you couldn't respond to it, because in the listener and in the person accused, it created an emotional response. In the accused, they felt guilt for something they hadn't done, and terror and fear because they were accused, was such a grave accusation, a sound, and in those who were the accusers and the mob itself, a pure hatred for something that they would respond to with rage, something or somebody who was different, or at least having been accused. The accusation was your condemnation. This is used today in psycholinguistics to separate peoples and individuals from one another. It takes a very self-aware, mature person to withstand accusations and the isolation they will feel as they progress through this matrix into the higher matrix, because there's more than one, you see, there's more levels here of deception than meets the eye. Even with those who help and understand some of this in the mid-level, they're still just mid-level. They don't understand the higher sciences at the top level. And so even within the bottom, middle, and top level, I categorize them in stages like the bottom floor. They're in the floor level. Those are in the air, stage 1, who understand so much. And there's still those at the ceiling level, but still stage 1 matrix, who think along the ways of their authorized patriots that the country's just been taken over now. It's just happening now, and their system's being destroyed. It wasn't their system before. That's the clue. That's the big kicker. When you understand that completely, and you don't emotionally respond to the tribal emblems and phrases and catchphrases that you've been conditioned with, then you might get into the second floor and start there on the ground level of understanding. Tremendous sciences behind this, but it takes a terribly mature person not to fold, a person who will constantly self-examine themselves to find out what they're still holding on to, what beliefs they still have, what societal conditioning is still holding them together, what's combating them, what's at war within themselves, that's motivating them. You have to be able to withstand so much to go higher, and very few people decide to make that journey up the mountain. When major changes are occurring, or being introduced rather, into a society, from the top, they're introduced along with reassurance, the terminology of reassurance of the existing culture or idealization of that culture. And this is a form of positive reinforcement. They find that if you introduce something directly opposite to the existing system, there's always a counter force, a counterbalance arises. That's why they train people in advance to become the leaders of those forces which lead you in circles. But if the people have been lulled to sleep, or the propaganda has worked very well through positive reinforcement, and by that I mean everything is just going fantastically well. The economy is booming. We're the most powerful country in the world. And Britain had that in its old empire days, even when people were scraping for firewood through depressions and so on. This propaganda keeps going. And it's amazing how people will deny their own sensibilities and reality, their personal reality, and go along and think there's something wrong with them because I should be up there enjoying all this prosperity. This is positive reinforcement which overrides the personal evaluation. So when big changes are happening from the top down, positive reinforcement comes to its peak because there generally is no counter force, or very little or very weak counter force to oppose it. It's a false sense of security which is used by all governments, and definitely the empire builders which move around from place to place and create new empires down through the ages. A simple example of this positive reinforcement, if a government needs to raise taxes for, which they always do for their new schemes, ongoing schemes, and their own personal pay packets too, which are ever increasing, which expand at the same pace as bureaucracies, they can get a reaction from the citizenry. This always says, well, we'll vote you out, we'll get a new party in and all that nonsense, which they're used to because they run on both sides of it. So rather than simply bring forth a tax, they bring through a lotto. That this is the common thing today. They've even tried fees. Before, you already paid for things, for your motor vehicle licensing, your road taxes, and well, now you pay fees for things on top of what you're already paying, and that's just another tax you see hidden. It doesn't create the reaction because again, the use of terminology alters perception. And if they want to raise taxes without having any big counter control or coming at them, they can create a lotto and really hype it up. And believe it or not, there's just as much force and persuasion behind that as there would be against the threat of law used against the individual who didn't pay a particular tax. It's just as powerfully effective, and the people are being controlled just as much as they would have been if force had been threatened to get the money from them. The control of behavior is often disguised and concealed under education or psychotherapy, religion, under teaching, sometimes under the name of a therapist or a priest or a counselor, rather than use the term manager, because really they're all managers of the system. So by the use of terminology alteration, the perception of management is being hidden. Generally, social proposals within society will omit any reference to the means. They'll use speeches which appeal to the emotion within a person, or the rationalization in the scientific age, where they'll say we have to better utilize human resources rather than say manage, because we're all being managed within the system. Many people ask, how is it possible for this agenda to never lose control? A simple and maybe overused example is that of Adam Weishaupt, only one member of a multifaceted society in one particular era who taught about the creation of foundations, benevolent foundations. So once again, the term benevolent makes anyone who thinks of attacking it think twice. It's kind of like attacking mum's apple pie. We find the same thing said in Albert Pike, the Pope of Freemasonry in the late 1800s, who said that we must climb and conquer throughout life. We must, he's talking about the boys at the top, or at least their workers, that is, because the ones at the top are the lazy boy, they don't work. But those who do all the work, the bees, was referred to by Pike when he said, we must do it through thrift and cunning, and even using the stock market, manipulating it basically, to acquire the wealth, to become the masters over the masters of the world. And what he meant by that was the creation of vast foundations. We find that we have more cultural change, more direction, planned direction for the next few centuries, have already been done in fact, by societies which are foundations, apart from the ones that train students even from university to take part in that, like the Rhodes Foundation. That's only one of many. You also have the Carnegie and Ford, Rockefeller and there's other ones under the Rothschilds, under the other big bankers, international bankers, under different disguised names, where they guide the world towards the path, along the path they already own, basically. We're on their path. The Council on Foreign Relations is another one, a society which is only the American branch of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, founded by Rockefeller, Rothschild, and Beers, and Cecil Rhodes and others, big players, and eventually joined by other big societies in Britain. They plan our world. They planned the amalgamation of the Americas. They planned the amalgamation of Europe. They planned the amalgamation into a region for the Pacific countries. They planned this as far back as the late 1800s, and they wrote about it. And Karl Marx wrote about it too, in the mid-1800s, before they did, in fact. We're living an agenda. We're living an agenda written by very powerful people who belong to secret societies. They've all gone through the degrees of Freemasonry. They've climbed above the degrees that the general public know of, and they've been tested all along the way for their ability to maintain secrets to their grave. I think a tremendously telling statement was given by Toynbee, Arnold Toynbee of Oxford, who, when speaking at, and this is a man who trained Rhodes Scholars for world social changes, directed changes. It is one of his main speeches he gave in one of the Scandinavian countries, I think it was Sweden, in about 1932. He said, "We always deny with our lips that which we do with our hands." And we find that technique is used by them all right up to the present. It's only recently the Council on Foreign Relations committees have come out on mainstream television as a council, an unelected council, by the way. They are not subject to being voted in or out by the public, but they are shaping the public's lives for them, and populations of whole countries are being shaped by them in a pre-arranged agenda. And it's done through mass persuasion on the public. The media is an essential arm of this guidance, this control. It could not be done without it. That's why, with the Council on Foreign Relations, the ones that the public will see, the members that the public see, are generally journalists, high journalists, or newspaper owners, or owners of television stations. The media business, that's their job. And the reason this can go on unimpeded, generation after generation, is that foundations last longer than individual people. How many people complete even the projects they would like to complete in their lifetime? But the foundations are almost eternal, and they have incredible wealth to back them up. And in this system, money is the key to control of the entire system, the economic system. So with the money, and with the logistics, and the think tanks, and the specialists, they can motivate society intergenerationally in particular directions, pre-planned, and the scientifically induced opinions, emotions, and so on will be regurgitated by an indoctrinated public. It's very simple. If you have all the money in the world, the outlet to all the media in the world, access, and you have the techniques to put it across scientifically and through entertainment, as well as propaganda documentaries. To make matters worse, it isn't simply the massive onslaught of downloading the public with new data designed to alter their behavior, to modify it, as they call it. We are now into an age where they're using technological weapons, psychotronic weaponry, much discussed at higher level warfare departments of every nation, because they knew a long time ago that the mind, on a very easy, simple level, could be induced through the beaming out of particular frequency waves. It could easily affect the moods of the people. They knew that it's been well tested, well proven, now it's being used in reality on nations to pacify them. They can make them either very aggressive or very pacified simply now, even just with the HARP technology alone. And there are other technologies beyond just the HARP technology. They're far more specific in what parts of the mind or the brain they want to target. And they're not testing it out. Whatever they're doing works. They know what to expect when they do this. This is really old hat. Prior to all this kind of technology, psychologists used to try and explain behaviorism almost like they did with the era of mass production in a mechanical way, and now it's gone beyond that into the electronic way. We know that the mind runs on chemicals, it depends upon them, electrochemical impulses and different frequencies within parts of the brain, different, all varying. They've all been well gone over. Every part of your cerebrum has gone over, well understood, and we can be targeted. Going as far back as Bell, his father, Alexander Graham Bell's father, was working on remote means of inducing words into the human brain through sound vibrations and actually through electronic vibrations, an early form of technotronic manipulation. They've been at this for an awful long time. They have used this in Gulf War I on the various Arab soldiers who came out of their trenches and weren't shell-shocked. They were simply stunned because it had been used on them, and it was admitted in the British newspapers that this technology had been used on them. We find the Soviets had boxes, little boxes on the teacher's desk, which could induce an attentive response from the students. It would relax them to an extent where the teacher was talking more like the hypnotist and getting the point straight into the minds of the youngsters. This was standard procedure in the Soviet system. In the West, because we're free, they have to hide all of this technology, and we know they were using it in many of the New Age foundation groups, putting the same technology in the walls even, so that you were guaranteed your personal experience with God, and He might even talk to you. This is the same type of technology shown by Dr. Nick Bigage, where he showed on CBC Canada, on the Wendy Mesley show, technology which could induce thoughts or sounds right into the brain itself, bypassing the ears. From the 1950s, technology used by the CIA and is now obsolete. Know thyself is the point, getting back to it. Know thyself. What are you? Who are you? What is motivating you? Where do your opinions, your prejudices come from? Who gives them to you? What camp do you allow yourself to be put into, where there's a leader that says, he or she speaks for me? Are you really a sovereign thinking individual? Are you honest with yourself? The fear of cultural change is what reinforces a predominant group. And those who have most to lose will support that as it goes under, in fact, often in denial, definitely always in anger when they see what they have become used to in their lifetime being changed. So self-interest is a big part of it too. The trick of the manipulators of this system is to give a perception that some other group is raising up above you, therefore threatening your existence. And so you'll spend your energies trying to counter what you see as that group, and you'll never see the puppet masters above them who fund the whole thing. And to hate, as I say, to hate brings on to the hater the characteristics of the one they hate. It's an interesting observation that many women who were bombarded with the power trip of feminism, which again did not have come from the grassroots. It doubled the tax base, it split the families, it's been great business for therapists and cult groups and all types of new age gurus who pretend they have the answers to their unhappiness. But many of them who tried the lesbian movement, why? Talking about rattling their chakras and doing their little ritualistic meditations with certain sequences which they try and pretend they're all scientific. It's amazing how science comes into it, as though science was going to be their great redeemer. Science might help if it was ever allowed to or practiced on the public in a medical field value. It might help certain ailments if we were ever to be given the real stuff, which we won't be. But it certainly doesn't bring a person closer to a meaning, a purposeful life or existence for themselves. And yet here they are trying to find scientific ways to rationalize their New Age religions. And so many, and they've wrapped in, of course, the whole wellness. Now this new terminology again, this new term, how's your wellness today? Oh, my wellness is very good. How's yours? Something that the United Nations said a few years ago they would promote as they turn the general public back to old herbs and so on, which might have worked, at least the old ones did, that have been used for thousands of years. They worked on old natural diseases, whereas all the modern ones are man-induced or created in laboratories. But they want the public to start taking lower forms of medicine because they want to depopulate rapidly. So they create a religion around herbalism, and you'll find people within this movement who believe everything they're told that comes out of all the magazines and the experts in the fields who are always selling them new types of grass to chew on or whatever, and promising them to, extend your life, live forever, make you young again. All the stuff that they've done throughout the ages with religion, the fountain of youth, because people are exploited in their fear of death. These series of talks are not meant to give you gloom and doom, but to see the brightness. You have to go through the darkness. And there's no way of skipping around it. You can't skirt around the edges. There are no edges. It's a solid wall. You got to get through it, and before you start climbing above. And then there is purpose for you. There is meaning in life. and the fears will leave. Don't react to the fearmongers all around you who are authorized to be there to keep you into a stampede of panic. Accept the fact that we've always been managed. It doesn't mean we'll always be managed, but we've always been managed, and the same managers or their descendants are in control today. Only by coming through the maze of indoctrination and conditioning can an individual break through into self-awareness. Tonight I leave you with a song by Weird Al Yankovic, the genius of perception. So when you've eaten all your chocolates and you feel bad about doing it, or you're sitting there with all your, like a billboard with your Gucci clothes and your brand name hat, sweater and track pants, and all the stuff you're supposed to have as a good corporate-owned citizen. When you've done it all and you still feel that big emptiness within, there's nothing left for it, is there? You just got to click on that computer, get into the internet, and if you can't afford the new and keep up with the Joneses and pretend to your neighbors, maybe you can get it used. Maybe that will bring you happiness, eh? After all, isn't that what every ad tells you? If you have this, you'll be happy. Good night, and may your God or gods go with you.